Puella Magi Magica Madoka was created with a very simple premise in mind. What if magical girls, but dark and gritty? For someone who grew up with anime like Sailor Moon, it was actually everything you wanted out of a series. A serious, well-animated story where the ideas you loved as a kid get to play out in a more serious way. However, like a lot of anime, there are some insanely deeper meanings to the story than even some of the most deep reviews managed to touch upon here on YouTube. So today, I want to talk about this wonderful 13-episode miniseries in full, the intentions behind its original story, and the real-life mythology that inspired it. At the end of the day, the 13-episode story of magical girl Madoka is very complex. But to put it simply, it's a world where magical girls exist all over the planet, fighting evil entities known as witches that push normal people into conflict, self-harm, and even death, all to feed on their suffering. The show doesn't focus on Madoka becoming a magical girl in the first episode, but instead, Madoka is constantly shown horrifying truths about being a magical girl that stop her from making that choice until the big finale. You see, in this world, magical girls live for a rather short time before eventually falling to hopelessness and then becoming witches themselves, the very monsters they were meant to fight. So this system of magical girls fighting witches ultimately just creates the problem that the magical girls are supposed to be solving. All of this happens so that an alien species known as the Incubators can harvest the energy given off by magical girls when they reach complete hopelessness and become witches. The Incubators are a long-living species with no emotions of their own, but they have the goal of harvesting enough emotion from the human species that they can use its energy to extend the life of the universe, delaying the loss of all energy that the universe consumes. The reason most magical girls take on this role is due to the fact that becoming a magical girl grants each of them one wish. While this wish is often made to help others, it always has some sort of monkey paw effect that plays on the fears of the girl making the wish, ruining the choice they had made for themselves and pushing them towards the hopelessness that makes you become a witch. The big twist of the show was that a new student at Madoka's school, Homura Akemi, is a time-traveling magical girl who had made a promise to Madoka in previous timelines to stop her from throwing her life away by becoming a magical girl and then a witch. No matter how many times Homura goes back in time and tries, however, she always fails, and even in the final timeline, Madoka ends up finding a reason to make a wish in the end. This wish was to give Madoka the power to erase all witches before they are born, past, present, and future. This doesn't prevent girls from becoming magical girls, and history develops mostly as it had before because of this. But at the end of each magical girl's life, they are taken away by Madoka instead of becoming a witch that hurts people. The power of this wish turns Madoka into a force that exists outside of the universe, more of a divine being, or as the incubator they call QB refers to her as, a god. After making her wish, she can't have the finite life of a magical girl, as her wish requires her to exist since the dawn of time until the end of the universe, as this wish even grants Madoka the power to stop herself from becoming a witch at the end of the universe after she's already saved every other magical girl. This creates an entirely new universe where Madoka never existed in her human form, but where everyone else got a version of their story that they could make peace with. Even Homura, who still longs to have saved Madoka, is able to find some sense of peace with what happened to her, even if the ending and subsequent movies show she never loses hope of one day finding a way to protect her. It was a beautiful story that this 4-minute recap couldn't possibly do justice for. But we're not here just to talk about the story beat by beat, but rather we want to discuss its deeper meanings hidden within the magical girl tropes. Part 1. Karma. The basis to understanding magical girl Madoka, as well as the spiritual traditions it is trying to talk about, is with the idea of karma, something mentioned many times within the show and is even alluded to outside of those moments constantly. This is done primarily through the subplot involving the wish that can be granted when one of the characters makes a contract with Kyubey to become a magical girl, which, as I said before, always seem to have some sort of monkey's paw effect, meaning some sort of bad outcome despite how well-intentioned the wish seemed. Karma is the idea that every action, even morally, has an equal opposite reaction, often repaid later over time to balance things out. With that in mind, in Madoka's world, if a girl makes a wish for something, there is always an opposite reaction as well. This begins with the character Mami, the first magical girl we see in action who rescues Madoka and her best friend Sayaka back in episode 1. While she never gives a fully detailed story of how she became a magical girl, all of the pieces are there in the background of her life. Mami lives alone despite being just slightly older than the other girls that she goes to school with. This isn't a choice she made after becoming a magical girl, as she absolutely hates how lonely her life is and is willing to risk Madoka and Sayaka's future just to feel like she finally has a family again. For one brief moment while she is talking to Madoka, we see a flashback to what looks like a terrible car wreck where the character Mami is barely able to open her eyes. And it's at this moment of desperation that Kyubey appears in front of her. Mami is a character who appears calm, collected, and thought out, telling the others to think things through before making the choice to become a magical girl, particularly for Madoka. That's because this is something she learned from her own mistakes, however, where she didn't have the opportunity to think things through, as she was presumably moments away from death before Kyubey granted her wish and made her a magical girl. With perhaps just moments left to live and undoubtedly a lot of pain regardless of her true condition, Mami appears to have made a wish out of desperation to live, not wanting her life to end at such a young age. However, Mami's mother and father were in the car crash as well, dying instantly, and her wish didn't account for their lives. The simple irony of her wish is that Mami wanted to live because she wanted to be with her parents. While her personal apartment seems like a dream to a teenage girl under the authority of real parents, this is just Mami's prison that she has to live with now that her parents are dead. Finally, it looked like she would get a surrogate family as a magical girl when she became friends with Madoka and Sayaka, but to karmically balance out her wish, Mami has to die in battle against a witch right in front of them, preventing her from having this new family and preventing Madoka from wanting to become a magical girl right away. Already, you can start to see the idea of how every action these girls take has a possible reaction based on their morals, and while seeing the outcome of this for Mami did stop Madoka from wanting to become a magical girl, it did not stop her friend Sayaka. Early on, Sayaka did think that becoming a magical girl was a bad idea, mostly because she didn't know what to possibly wish for. The girls have grown up in a paradise-like near future in Japan where all of their needs are met, and all Madoka in particular really wishes for is to be admired the way she admires her mother, a working woman who provides a beautiful lifestyle for her family. And after meeting Mami, Madoka begins to admire and want to be like her too, helping others by fighting witches. Early on, Sayaka discusses how they could have anything they want, but they can't possibly think of what they could really use the wish on, as even outside of what the world provides, they don't have any personal tragedies themselves to rectify. That being said, Sayaka does know someone who could use a wish but can't make it himself, a boy that Sayaka has feelings for named Kyosuke. Kyosuke is a child prodigy musician who teaches Sayaka about the music he is learning to play, wanting to be a master of the more complex pieces. When he gets sick, however, and begins to lose the ability to use his arm, his entire future is in jeopardy. Sayaka wants to connect with him regardless because she actually has feelings for him, but when he begins to spiral into depression, she loses that connection with him. Kyosuke could get his ability to play back if he could make a wish himself, but as a boy, he doesn't have the option of making a contract. But Sayaka could make that wish for him and become a magical girl herself, taking on a burden so that he can live a better life. It's during the early episodes before Sayaka becomes a magical girl that the girls discuss the importance of having a clear mind when making a wish for someone else, alluding to the karmic return based on morals as opposed to actions. What they describe at the beginning of the series is making a wish only if it's for the other person's benefit and not to get some other person's gratitude, which are two very different intentions for the wishmaker to have. Of course, with the magical girls having secret identities, Sayaka would never be able to reveal what she did for Kyosuke when she makes the wish, so in theory, she would never get his gratitude to begin with. But in the case of Sayaka, what she really wants is to be Kyosuke's girlfriend, and maybe one day even his wife. By healing Kyosuke's ability to play music, she is hoping to heal their connection and to get the equivalent of his gratitude in the form of a relationship. Sayaka convinces herself that she's doing this simply for his benefit since he could never know about the wish. And she convinces herself that as long as he is happy playing music, she could never regret the decision she's making to become a magical girl, but that is quickly proven false. As soon as Kyosuke is healed, Sayaka and Madoka's other friend, Hitomi, reveals her feelings for Kyosuke as well, and Sayaka feels pressured into letting the two be together without any interference from herself. In part, this is due to the fact that Sayaka has become a magical girl, which she believes is making her feel less human each day, less worthy of a relationship with someone like Kyosuke. In the end, she gave up her life to die at a young age in order to let Kyosuke play music again, and he immediately ran off into the sunset with another girl. The karmic return goes beyond the physical, but has to shape Sayaka's mindset as well. Taking on this huge burden of fighting evil so that someone she loves can go live a life without him causes her to begin to descend into hopelessness. And she finds herself talking to random men on the train who are describing the way they use and then abandon women who say they love them. In Sayaka's mind, this is what happened to her, despite the fact that Kyosuke had no way of knowing Sayaka had anything to do with his miraculous recovery. From what we see as the audience, Kyosuke may really barely know Sayaka and just enjoy her as a casual friend, entirely unaware of how Sayaka idolizes him. In the end, what makes Sayaka fall into hopelessness is the feeling that she made a sacrifice, but that no one else will make one for her. She even yells at Madoka at one point, belittling her for not being willing to use her wish to help Sayaka in some way, despite Sayaka thinking she made a selfless choice to help Kyosuke. Her choice is clearly not selfless, however, as if it was, she wouldn't expect anything in return other than the benefit of the other person. And it's the realization that she left the world behind that can treat women in this way, not just magical girls, that causes her to become a witch. The entire magical girl system, thus, is one that is really not about getting what you wanted, but being given the opportunity to trade one outcome for another, but always in perfect balance. So what exactly is the purpose of this? Part 2, Magical Girls Are Angels. When watching Magical Girl Madoka, the show doesn't give you the exact answers on the origins of things, but the concept of magical girls and witches as a whole is something that the Incubators were shocked to find and discover. They use this system to their advantage to get energy for the universe, but it's interesting to note how they couldn't even begin to farm this energy for themselves, even on a smaller level. While some other species seem to have emotions in the universe, none of them come even close to the power that humans have, and in particular, the power of magical girls. According to Kyubey, the emotions humans experience are actually considered a mental disorder to his people. But even without the interference of the Incubators, this emotion that humans have appears to fulfill greater purposes, and this purpose matches our real-life mythology. Mythology is best recognized by its use of mythical figures such as gods, or in later traditions as they are called, angels, in order to give reverence to the one true god that is said to exist above the lesser demigods or angels. But let's explain that connection to Madoka. In the mythological tradition, each god tends to have its own theme and even power, but like the magical girls, they are presented as rather human. This is true both in pagan mythologies like the Greek, where you would have Zeus the god of thunder, Poseidon the god of the sea, and Hades the god of the underworld, as well as in the monotheistic religions like Judaism and Christianity. In Judaism, the claim in the Old Testament is that there is one higher being we would call the creator of this world, who exists above those gods of the pagan religions, with these figures being reduced to the angels who are only meant to act as an intermediary for that god. In the extra-biblical texts like the Book of Enoch, these fallen angels maintain their individual themes, with each being described as giving different forbidden knowledges to humans based on what that theme is. The most notable example of this is Azazel, who is described as creating the art of metalsmithing, which led to weapons and inevitably to wars. All these gods and fallen angels, however, are not presented as divine entities that came from above, but often as ancestors of humans who ascended from our world below after their deaths. This was a process that ancient societies had actually ritualized in a form similar to that explored in Magical Girl Madoka, with their slow change into witches. You see, in ancient societies and even around the world today, certain cultures had a death and resurrection ritual that was meant to connect you with your ancestor spirit or god. What this would do is give the initiate certain benefits based on the wishes they had made to make changes in the world, but it was also meant to stop the reincarnation process of humans. Like magical girls quickly dying young compared to other humans, these identities were believed to pass on from this realm early by moving past reincarnation to become one of these angels or demigods in the afterlife. This is reflected by the magical girls who get their souls ripped from their body and are given powers specifically based on the wish that they made in the world. Sayaka, for instance, wishes to heal Kyosuke, and as a result, her power is to heal even faster than even the other magical girls can. Meanwhile, fallen angel ancestor spirits like the Azazel discussed before was said to use his power in order to bring weaponry to the world, with the implication in Azazel's greater backstory being that he developed this power because he died in battle himself. And during that intense death and then spiritual resurrection, he became a spirit that watches over humans by giving them information based off of his power of weaponry and war. So, like a mythological initiate, a magical girl takes on a spiritual role to help others in the time they have left on Earth, using powers given to them based on the change they want to see in the world. However, even in mythology, this is presented as having a potential negative consequence that balances it out. This is due to the idea that the one true God has a vision for where he wants the Earth and humanity to go, but he can only get us there by having us stumble our way upward with these wishes that we make. According to Kyubey, humans would not have developed beyond having people covered in mud living in caves if not for the interference of the Incubators, making contracts to help unleash the humans' full potential to become magical girls and then witches. But the implication is that this power was always meant to be harvested by humans at some point. They may have evolved that way on their own, but it's also possible that Kyubey's species was essentially created without this ability so that they could be guided to bring it out in other species like the humans. It was their wishes that slowly elevated the world with one little problem at a time, though as we see in the series, this led to conflict for the people and the magical girls. Just as our characters had a karmic punishment for their wishes, so too did the magical girls in the past, whose wishes would have led to the same blessings that the fallen angels were said to give humanity. Many of these girls also face personal consequences, such as real historical figures being shown to have been magical girls who made wishes to help others, but who end up getting burned at the stake, treated like witches in the Salem witch trials, or even made as sacrifices in ancient tribes. And it's after their death as a magical girl that they actually become witches, mirroring the fall of the gods of the ancient religions to fallen angels, figures who are demonic and try to hurt instead of help. This is due to the desire to receive gratitude more than the desire to benefit others, corrupting a magical girl, until they basically become a force like Sayaka, who wants to be supported or worshipped because of the contribution that they made to the world. This doesn't mean that the magical girls are inherently bad because of the karmic balance, but rather, the sacrifice that comes with each wish ultimately creates a world where everyone else benefits, leading to Madoka's time where they are living in Japan as a sort of Garden of Eden with advanced technology. And ultimately, that becomes the framework through which Madoka understands how to properly make a wish. As discussed with her friends at the beginning of the series, you need to make sure you are doing something for other people's benefit instead of their gratitude. That means recognizing that every wish comes with a sacrifice, and that the only noble sacrifice is the sacrifice of oneself. To sacrifice anything else turns that wish from selfless to selfish. Madoka's wish, thus, is one that changes her entire nature beyond that of any magical girl before her. And through this, we can see what the ultimate goal of this system was. Madoka's wish is to erase all witches before they are born, saving each magical girl from the karmic debt that they created when they made their wish. In doing this, Madoka also has to ascend to a level beyond just remaining on the earth to fight small battles. She has to become a god outside of the universe, one who can rewrite her own existence and shape history to get the same basic timeline with the magical girl's wishes, but without the witches afterwards. The ultimate theme is that self-sacrifice is what makes you become a god instead of a human, and that is why these powers exist. Whether on their own or from the influence of the Incubators, humans were meant to evolve to a point where they could understand that. But it is only by evolving to a point where they can truly understand selflessness where someone can pull this off. And Madoka doesn't even do that in the original timeline, and instead it takes very many timelines in order to pull this off with the help of Homura, where there's even more crazy mythological symbolism, painting Homura and Madoka as different versions of the Messiah. It's no surprise that this story has clear themes relating to Jesus, with Madoka's sacrifice for the earth taking away the sins of all previous magical girls and elevating her to a god who can even erase her own sin in the process, stopping her from destroying the entire universe despite creating another. It's what Kyubey describes as an event that breaks the laws of balance and karma, but Madoka's own karmic potential is so huge that she's able to pull it off. This is not due to her inherent nature, but instead, Madoka has been slowly curated to evolve like humanity had over time, but through the power of time travel. This is done ultimately by Homura, who keeps traveling back in time to save Madoka, but keeps failing. Every time she starts the timeline over, Madoka's karmic energy becomes stronger, carrying over from the timeline before. Each reset of the timeline also makes the world hinge more and more on Madoka herself, as the world essentially ends and is reborn again every time Madoka dies. Because of this, Homura herself is presented as something of a Christ parallel, hanging in a crucified fashion, surrounded by clocks when her journey through time to try and save Madoka is described. The thing is that in Judaism, there is actually the concept of two messiahs. The Christian tradition essentially holds both of these to just be Jesus in different forms, with Jesus first setting up the world the way they need it with his death on the cross, but later experiencing a final death where he becomes an even higher spirit, returning to rule the world for his millennial reign. In Judaism, the first of these messiahs is Messiah, son of Joseph, who is meant to suffer and die, but ultimately becomes a higher spirit in the heavens above. Messiah, son of Joseph's job is to pave the way for the earthly Messiah, who's meant to watch over the world until the end of time. Madoka, of course, becomes that suffering Messiah, who shapes the world to what she wants it to be through her death, more of a paradise without the negative influence of witches. Homura, however, is a being that also exists outside of time, as her mission is to save Madoka through the use of time travel. This made Homura retain her memories even in the new timeline where everyone else has forgotten Madoka, as she is just a divine essence now. And because of that, she retains her mission of helping Madoka in some way. And as long as a magical girl doesn't become hopeless, they don't actually have to die. For most magical girls, this means living only a few years at best before they become a witch, but for Homura, it was always a bit different. Homura's desire to help Madoka is so strong that even in this new world, Homura is shown to live until the end of time, even long after all of the humans seem to have passed away and all that exists on the planet is some sort of desert landscape. As long as she has the hope to help Madoka, however, she can continue to exist. But that also means she is forever separated from Madoka by that same logic. In many ways, the universe itself is now Madoka, and as long as Homura tries to save Madoka, she is keeping the universe alive as well. Madoka can't go on to have her final rest until the last of the magical girls have been saved by her, and in addition to herself at the end of the universe, this would include Homura. This makes the two characters required opposites you might think of as being like yin and yang. Homura being yin, or darkness, and Madoka being yang, or light. Yin and yang are used to represent destruction and creation, but they are really just two different sides of the same cycle as we see with the yin-yang symbol, with both being needed not just to shape the world, but also to shape each other, just as Homura and Madoka both shaped each other into becoming these eternal spirits that watch over the universe in different ways. Madoka on the spiritual side, and Homura on the physical side. This is how the original 13-episode series ended, though the sequel movie Rebellion did explore the idea of Homura finally giving up hope, but only long enough for Madoka to come and try and stop her from becoming a witch, with that really being Homura's big plan to trap Madoka in a seemingly normal life again. It was an excellent follow-up to the original series with stunning animation, but ultimately it played on the same themes and stories established in the series, the elevation of these humans into their godhood. But even with these explanations, it still leaves some questions about Kyubey and his people. Part 4, The Incubators and the Demiurge. While we discussed the idea of magical girls themselves being angels or becoming gods, there's one figure that the Incubators actually match. In the show, the Incubators are presented as a sort of answer to the ancient aliens theory, the fringe theory that humans have been shaped by aliens who want to exploit them like cattle. However, in Esoterica, this figure is treated as entirely spiritual. In esoteric schools like Gnosticism, this entity is known as the demiurge, Greek for architect. Gnosticism was the spiritual movement from the early centuries of Christianity that took certain parts of the New Testament and tried to rewrite the Old Testament around those ideas. That primary idea was Jesus declaring that the father of the Pharisees, or the ancestor angel of the Pharisees, is a liar and a murderer trying to keep people out of heaven. This was a small mention overall in the Christian New Testament, but it was an important anecdote Jesus gave about the Jewish angel known as Metatron. Metatron is not the one true God in Judaism, but like with the other nations, the Bible describes Israel as being given their own angel to watch over and guide them, just as the other humans did with their own ancestor spirits. For Israel, this is their ancestor Enoch, the great-grandfather of the biblical Noah from the Bible. In later Jewish texts like the third book of Enoch, this figure is described as being the prince of the cosmos, the one who controls the world on behalf of the one true God. In the Old Testament, when God assigns this angel, he warns Israel that this angel has his name within it. It's because of this that the later Jewish tradition insists that the name of the one true God in the Bible is sometimes not a reference to the one true God, but it can also be a reference to Metatron, a lower angel who ultimately is said to mean well, but who their texts say has both good and evil within them, and thus can mislead people. In Gnosticism, the demiurge is referred to as the architect of the universe because he is Metatron, the angel who rules over this world for a period, until he is meant to be cast out at the time that Jesus claims that he will rise. What's important in Gnosticism, however, is that they emphasize the idea not just that this Metatron figure is keeping souls out of heaven, but that the divine light of the lower humans is actually being exploited by him in order to extend his life as long as possible. This mirrors the story of the Incubators, who are these emotionless architects of the universe. They don't have any reason to believe in God or spiritual ideas, and instead, they reckon themselves as the most intelligent race in creation. With that in mind, they have made it their duty to manage the other planets, or at least just the Earth, but with the goal of harvesting that energy in order to personally extend the life of the universe itself, their domain. In the Gnostic text, the demiurge is described as being like the Incubators in that he isn't aware of any spiritual powers that exist beyond him. He formed in the world thinking he's the most powerful figure and doesn't recognize when certain lights come from above him. What he doesn't realize then is that there isn't just a one true God above him, but that the light he is trying to harness for himself within the humans is actually from a source far above him as well. You see, in the Jewish Kabbalistic texts like the 13th century Zohar, Metatron is described as ruling in the world of Bria, which is the second highest dimension there is. It says here that unfortunately, Metatron and the souls of Metatron have not merited access to the higher dimension, the home of the one true God. In the Zohar, however, it's the divine light of the humans, and more specifically, the fallen angels lost among the humans, who are meant to return to this place. Soaring above Metatron, just as Madoka was destined to soar above the Incubators and take the other magical girls with her. And in Jewish Kabbalah like the Zohar, as well as in Gnosticism in general, it is the spirits of these fallen angels who are meant to rise up and become the new figure we think of as the one true God. In the show, it is Madoka who becomes a true god that exists outside of reality that they control, a reality that was made for the humans themselves to manifest seemingly and have their divine sparks rise this way. What's really interesting is that in Christianity and Gnosticism, the fall of the divine light into the control of the demiurge is presented as part of the god's ultimate plan to raise that light to an even higher station. In the esoteric tradition, it is said that we only fall in an attempt to rise higher, and by falling into the material world, the divine light is able to remove any impurities and ascend even higher than it started. In the show, Madoka is never revealed to manufacture this destiny for herself, but the implications are in the end result, in Madoka becoming a force that creates the world instead of just living within it. This is something even the Incubators were not capable of, something planted inside of the universe to be refined, but which had to grow within it before it could ascend to become something even bigger. The story of Puella Magi Madoka Magica didn't end with these 13 episodes, but the characters and lore were expanded upon in comics, a sequel movie, video games, a spin-off anime based on those games, and another movie that's supposed to be coming in 2026. But it's the original 13-episode story that left its impact on the anime industry in a way that follow-ups have never replicated. It's not the first anime to try tackling these complex themes even in a 13-episode formula, and it's actually a pretty common approach to Japanese entertainment, relatively speaking at least. You can even check out my video I did on another 13-episode anime series called Serial Experiments Lane, which has nothing to do with magical girls, but still captures the exact same Gnostic themes in its narrative. But there's something about Madoka's world that has a different level of immersion and rewatchability over a lot of other shows that try to do the same thing. In part, I would say this is due to the show being treated like an initiation itself instead of a story about the initiated subjects. The most obvious hints of this comes with the constant imagery of white and black tiles, which we see following the girls everywhere they go. This is one of the most common connecting elements of the mystery school tradition, where the initiation ritual of death and resurrection we described earlier is performed on a white and black tiled floor. This is even seen in modern mystery schools today like Freemasonry, though the more mystical mystery schools today even claim it to be an important symbol for separating the light and darkness within ourselves that imprints on the mind during initiation. One of my favorite moments in the entire series is when Madoka and Sayaka have learned the grim truth of what it means to be a magical girl, or at least the first of the grim truths because of the death of Mami. After this initiation of sorts, Madoka and Sayaka talk about how unreal it feels to be living in a different reality from everyone around them. They know that their fate and the fate of the world is controlled by higher beings like witches, magical girls, and incubators, all competing to decide what will happen next. They talk about this while surrounded by the black and white tiles, talking about how they see the entire world differently but no one else does. It's as if over the course of 3 episodes they had the 3 degrees of initiation that we associate with Freemasonry, with the 2 trying to return to their normal lives afterwards but finding that they have been irrevocably changed and that they are now among the few active players in the world while everyone else is living in a sort of internal simulation. It becomes hard for them to live the lives that they just had a few days ago, where everything is beautiful and innocent, like living on a beautiful farm without realizing that you're just the cattle. But once initiated, you see the truth everywhere when no one else does. You see what little things are being controlled by someone above you and how others are under that control, and there is nothing you can say to actually stop them. And that's what separates Magical Girl Madoka not just from other subversive anime or anime in general, but even the most esoteric among them which try to teach the same things. But if you want more information about this, check out one of our other big mythological deep dives for anime like Serial Experiments Lane right here on Random Universe. Or you can go check out the playlist we have on our main channel, Cartoon Universe, which has over 800,000 subscribers and tons of videos detailing different Western cartoons and their esoteric themes like this. Links as always are in the pinned comments down below, and let me know what you want me to talk about here on Random Universe. Whether it's more anime, some movies, or any other media that isn't just Western cartoons. See you guys next time.